Hello and welcome to this episode of Filmi Ladies. I am Pitu, this is Beth, and today we have this amazing guest called Isha. Those of you who are on Instagram and are sari aficionados would know her as at Desi Drapes. She is absolutely amazing, and we will put the link to her account in our YouTube comment as well. If you have seen her account, you know that she posts pictures of herself in all these amazing saris. She posts these sort of like historical anecdotes and all of these things. She's all about the Lucknowi tehzeeb, and we're so excited to have her today to chat about saris in Bollywood films. So the sari, as you know, is this ubiquitous garment that Indian people have been wearing for like millennia. And in the films, our heroines have cried, romanced, cavorted, danced, done sports, done all sorts of things. Yesterday I was watching Gulab Gang and Juhi Chawla was wearing a sari, and at one point she was on the treadmill. So I guess you can also be on the sari and do your daily exercise. So today we're going to talk about all of our favorite sari moments from Bollywood films. And I know, Beth, you are bursting with questions to ask Isha. So do you want to go with the first one?
Sure. So question one is just thinking about saris in films. Who are some of the iconic directors or costume designers that come to mind for you?
First of all, I'd like to thank both of you for inviting me to this conversation. And I must say this before we start talking, that I'm not really an expert on the subject. I'm just an enthusiast, and I'm going to be sharing things that I have observed or I have read about. So I don't claim to be an authority on this as such. So that's a great question to start with, because I think the first person that comes to my mind is Bhanu Athaiya, the costume designer who was also the first Indian to have won the Oscar for her work. And she won the Oscar for the film Gandhi by Richard Attenborough. It was made in the 80s, but she started her career fairly before that, in the 1950s. And she worked with some of the greatest directors that Hindi cinema has seen, like right from Gurudat to Raj Kapoor, to Yash Chopra, and to Vidhu Vinod Chopra. And later she even worked with Ashutosh Gowarikar for Lagan and also for Swades. So she had such a long and illustrious career, during which she designed some of the most iconic looks that we have seen in Bollywood, not just saris, but otherwise, other costumes as well. So definitely Bhanu Athaiya is one person who comes to my mind first, because most of the costume designers even today consider her to be their guru, because she was the one who established so many things in the trade.
Right. I have seen Gandhi, and I actually did not know that she designed the costumes for Swades. I had no clue, but that's very interesting.
That's the thing, I mean, she is celebrated. Of course, there are a lot of fashion magazines and fashion literature that has covered her, but among the common people, they would know the name of Manish Malhotra and, Nita Lula, or maybe even Anna Singh, designers like these. But these people started working maybe 3 to 2 decades ago. But Bhanu Athaiya was around, like, in the golden period, the period that's considered the golden period of Indian cinema. So I think she has still not been given the credit that's due to her.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even know the name yet. It's like Bhanu Athaiya, who, like, every time people talk about India's chances at the Oscars, like even right now with RRR, and they'll be like, oh, well, we know A.R. Rahman's won an Oscar, and we know Satyajit Ray has won an Oscar, but who was the first Indian to win an Oscar? And usually there's like blank faces, but it was actually Bhanu Athaiya for Gandhi. So you're right. I mean, she's definitely sort of an unsung hero. Beth, I know you're bursting to say something.
I know her name, and I knew about Gandhi, and that's all I knew about her. And I muted myself so I could, quickly Google. And for those like me who didn't know, she worked on Teesri Manzil, which fantastic costumes guide, which we've discussed at length on this podcast.
Yes.
She worked on CID, on Piazza, on Satyam Shivam Sundaram, which we talked about just a couple episodes ago. So she has been throughout this Filmi Lady podcast even, and we didn't even know. And it makes me want to really redouble my efforts to pay attention to the names, because it does matter who works on things. It credit where credit is very much due. Thank you for reminding us of her.
Yeah.
What about you, Beth? Do you have any directors or costume designers that you associate with saris?
Not with saris. I don't know much about costume design, and the person I always happen to notice is Jennifer Kendall, wife of Shashi Kapoor, because she costumed him. I don't know if she did other people in addition to him on the same films or not, but she comes up a lot. And I have read that she is credited with him maybe not going as far into some of the trends or like the more flamboyant styles of certain times. She kind of kept him, stylish, but
like reined him in
a little more. Yeah. and I love the, 70s and 80s wild styles. But I think of her sometimes, which is interesting. And of course she's, English, but also India, grew up in India and has this interesting experience. So just the idea that someone with this sort of slightly more international experience, but she's also just a name I knew from other reasons. So she kind of catches in my mind. So yeah, I'm not knowledgeable about this.
It's funny because, anytime you would read like those old Bollywood gossip magazines like Stardust and stuff like that, there would always be some filmy wife who fancied themselves to be a fashion designer or costume designer. And they would be like, oh, I design costumes for my husband. And one thing that comes to mind is, if you see Shah Rukh Khan in Ye Kali Kali Aankhein, so that absolutely hideous costume that he's worn is actually designed by Gauri Khan. And I was like, oh dear. And then I did also remember reading that Rishi Kapoor, when he was in that awkward phase where he wasn't quite like this young romantic heartthrob anymore and had started overstaying his welcome in romantic comedies, he started wearing all of these sweaters to sort of hide the pudge and everything. Like his look became sweaters, pants, and like white shoes and stuff. And apparently Neetu Singh used to go shopping for him for sweaters in like Switzerland. Yeah, I read an article interview where Rishi Kapoor said that when they were shooting for Chandni, Neetu Kapoor and Pamela Chopra would go shopping every day, and she would come back with like armfuls of sweaters for him. And then he would wear
always wondered who we credit those sweaters to. And it's my
Neetu
beloved.
Singh. That's your gal. I think for me, when I think of saris, the first name that comes to mind is actually Yash Chopra, because I'm that generation that grew up kind of like idolizing Sridevi, and all of his chiffon saris, that he put her in Chandni, that was like really gorgeous. I mean, especially her yellow sari.
I'm sorry to cut you there, but actually Chandni was Bhanu Athaiya's.
Wow.
Chandni was a Bhanu Athaiya film, and of course, she was a director's designer. But the credit for all those chiffon sari looks that we saw Sridevi in is actually Bhanu Athaiya's.
Wow. Amazing. I was actually going to ask you, because apart from Chandni, the other movie that I really love Sridevi's outfits in, and they're not technically saris, they're lehenga cholis, but similar vibe kind of, is Lamhe. And now I'm almost scared to ask, is Lamhe also Bhanu Athaiya?
No, I don't think Lamhe is her.
Okay.
It might, I'm not sure, it might be someone called Leena Daru, who was also, I think, Athaiya's almost her contemporary. They were working at the same time. But I know for sure that Silsila was Leena Daru, because that was
that had some gorgeous looks from Rekha. Oh my God. And then the contrast with Jaya Bachchan's much more subdued kind of silks with like thin borders. But Jaya's glam look, Rekha's glam looks were the best. Like, especially that scene in the hospital where she comes to see Amitabh and she has her face kind of in like a bouquet of roses and she's just like smoldering looks. I mean, yes. Beth, were you saying something?
No, I'm just marveling at this career that she had, to work on all those different films. And as you were saying, very much a designer, a director's, this is someone committed to the vision of the film, not maybe of her own, but obviously bringing her own knowledge and skills to it very, very much, but working within the film.
I think
Yeah.
in recent times, one of the directors that I do associate with good costuming is Sanjay Leela Bhansali, starting with the outfits that we saw in Devdas, like all of those amazing heavy brocades and, all of those gorgeous like Zardozi work and everything that we saw Aishwarya in, and, that whole like Thakurayan look. And then in Ram Leela, we had all of the outfits that Deepika wore with like mirror work and everything. One thing I do like is that in his movies, you do get a sense of locale. His outfits are not generic. So the way it looks in, Ram Leela is different from Devdas. It's different from Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam. There's like a different look. And I feel like he tends to favor Neeta Lulla in his, like she usually does her work for him, right? But maybe also Sabyasachi Mukherjee, I think, is credited with some of the outfits.
I think he's worked with different designers for different films. And personally, the only film where I've sort of liked his costumes, because I personally don't have so much of a connect with his work, but the film where I really liked the costumes was Gangubai. And I think it was Sheetal Sharma, the costume designer who's worked with him. Though I do have certain reservations even about some of the choices they made in Gangubai. But Devdas, of course, it's a lot about creative liberty, and in Hindi cinema particularly, there's a lot of you need to suspend disbelief to be able to enjoy it. So of course there are debates around how period appropriate or how region appropriate his costumes are, because I think some of the saris that he's used in Devdas had the kind of embroidery that probably did not exist in that period that the film showcases, or probably it was not so popular in Bengal at that time.
Right.
So, and of course, this is a debate, and I'm not really fixated on, like, some people are very particular about the authenticity and the period appropriateness of the
Right.
costume, but he has a different style, and so he does take that kind of liberty. And that's okay because his audience enjoys it. And I think
Right.
eventually that's what matters, that cinema has to be a cathartic and a visually appealing experience. I mean, visually satisfying, delighting experience. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was thinking about, I don't know if you've watched Bridgerton on Netflix, but the discussion around the lack of accuracy in the costuming has been really, really interesting. And again, that's not something I know anything about, but watching how upset people get, and then I think very spirited defense that along the lines of what you've just mentioned, of it needs to be a visually satisfying and engaging experience, and that is often more important. And even as a person who, I was raised by historians, I work in a museum, I love accuracy. However, there are other things as well. And I'm really glad that you put that forward. And because that also is a platform for the creativity of these costume artists who, as we're talking about, are so often women. And that is wonderful to get to be a platform for that.
So I had a question, Isha, for you, because you said that you did like the costumes in Gangubai Kathiawadi. So what about it was appealing? Was it an accuracy thing? Was it that he maybe, like, what about it appealed to you?
I just love the fact that they chose one color for her, which was white. And it gave such a, I mean, it gave a certain seriousness and grace, and yet, a charm to Alia, because she's such a young girl, but she had to play a role which demands so much maturity. And I think it gave her that kind of a screen persona that the role needed. So my only reservation with that was that the costume designer you used a chikankari copy sari. Like it is a sari that is machine embroidered, but it mimics the chikankari embroidery. So I wasn't very happy with that, because then this leads to, because films, especially a film like Gangubai that's become so iconic already, They influence trends in India, and then there are sellers who are going to sell saris, saying that okay, this is the Gangubai sari,
Right.
and then they are going to sort of the chicken. If they had used like an authentic chikankari sari for her, then it would have benefited the sector and the
The
artisans.
artisans.
But now it's going to sort of um, not be so good for them, because then they have already normalized a machine piece on screen,
Right.
and that's, yeah. So that was my only concern. Otherwise, like I said, I really like the fact that they chose one code for the character, which was white,
Mm.
and it gave her a beautiful screen presence.
It also made for some beautiful cinematography, because especially in the scenes where she's in these very dingy dark rooms where there's like just a sliver of light coming in, everything is dark, and then she really stands out like with the light and shadows. That was really beautiful too. And then of course the associations of white with purity and chastity and things like that. I also like that in her character, where she's not yet a madame yet, like in her journey when she's still someone who's been trafficked, they put her in all these very chamku saris, like all these nylons and georgettes in very bold colors, and like all the jagmug on them, and then the flower in the hair and the makeup. I mean, that was all like very brilliantly done, I thought. It reminded me a little bit of the movie Chameli, where
Yeah,
they put similar colors and garish blouses on Kareena Kapoor.
right.
And then let's see. We were gonna ask you if there are some iconic sari looks that you love. For example, I know that I am very partial to the Mumtaz drape. But are there any like certain looks that stand out to you? And I kind of know the answer to this a little bit because I follow you. I follow your account Desi Drape, so I've seen a little bit before.
So before I answer this, I must tell you that that Mumtaz iconic drape from Brahmachari is also Bhanu Athaiya.
This is a Bhanu Athaiya episode, basically.
I mean, it's just sad that
The
we don't
woman's like
talk
a
enough
genius.
about it, because that look is so iconic and
Yes.
everybody knows it. And every time you talk about sort of different or quirky sari
Hmm.
drapes, or sari drapes that are so-called contemporary, etc., everybody just thinks of that. And most people actually don't know that it was designed by Bhanu Athaiya.
Right.
So yeah, so that aside, I think because I was born in mid 80s, so I grew up watching a lot of films in the 90s. So I
Hmm.
remember the decade of 90s a lot, and I sort of saw um like like the whole decade and how the sari scene sort of changed. And fortunately at that time, I would say fortunately at that time when I was growing up, there were a lot of 70s and 60s films on the TV. So we did get to watch that cinema as well. We were exposed to it. So it was interesting to see, the kind of difference. For me, I think, and of course, it's again a subject that can be discussed for another podcast. But all these songs that maybe look a bit problematic now, like the yellow sari that Ravina has worn for Tip Tip Barsa Pani, or even Sri Devi's look from the blue sari look from Mr. India.
Mm.
So that monochromatic sari blouse coordinated,
Mm.
plain saris, those were really the thing when I was growing up. And I
Right.
think somewhere I also kept thinking that this is how saris were supposed to be. You are supposed to match your sari completely with your blouse, and if you want to look sensuous and you want to look pretty, then your sari should be a plain and sheer kind of a fabric, maybe probably like a chiffon or a georgette. So that
Mm.
was something that shaped my aesthetics for the sari, at least when I was growing up. And then so in India we have this ritual of wearing a sari to our school farewells whenever we are graduating
Yes.
from school. And so I think the sari that I chose at that time was influenced a lot by this aesthetic, because it was a plain chiffon, pink colored with a matching pink blouse. And so I think those monochromatic kind of looks, even from Chandni, like you already mentioned, so
Right.
those had sort of shaped our my generation's idea of the sari.
Right.
But again, when I started watching more serious cinema as a design student, I came across films of Satyajit Ray, and then there were some beautiful saris even in those films. And especially the first film that comes to my mind is Charulata, because
Yeah.
Charulata, the blouses, the Victorian lace, the sleeves and the collars, and also the typical jamdani saris that the Bengali women in that period used to wear. I mean, the well-off Bengali women, and even the simpler tat saris that you see in some of those films, they were beautiful, and they opened my world to different kind of saris. And similarly, when I started watching Sham Benegal, and because
Mm.
his cinema is not mainstream, so
Yeah.
he was very particular about the regional drapes that should be featured if they were talking about a certain region, like Ankur or Bhumika, because these
Mm.
stories, they were set in a specific region. Otherwise, the mainstream films when we were growing up, they were sort of, they were never fixed to a place or a time. There was,
Right.
nobody told you what city this is, what region this
Yeah.
is, and everybody spoke the same language, the same accent, and they were different. But these films, they were very, very conscious of their background, their cultural
Right.
background. So in Bhumika, you do see Smita Patilji wearing a lot of Maharashtrian, the drapes that are popular in Maharashtra,
Right.
the weaves. Then
Right.
you see so on and so forth. So for me, there are so many iconic sari looks, from even these films that are
Mm.
not mainstream as such.
Right.
Charulata and even Bhumika. I just loved Smita Patil, and she's so beautiful, and whatever she wore,
Right.
she looked so amazing. So
And she often, even off screen, wore all of these very earthy toned, like ilkas and kanjivarams and things like that, with these greens and maroons, very beautiful. But it was so funny. I was telling Beth last time that so I'm kind of from the same generation as you, probably a little bit older. And when I was in India, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, Doordarshan would show these NFDC films. And I was telling Beth that used to be my mom's siesta time. So I was kind of like a captive audience, had nothing to do with. We didn't have cable back then. So I would just watch these NFDC films, and those really opened up my eyes as well. Because until then, Hindi cinema for me was just, popular films like Maine Pyar Kiya and things like that. And that was the exposure to the Sham Benegals and the Nihlanis of the world. But you're right that when you watch, even now when you watch a popular Bollywood film, it doesn't matter what era it is, you can't actually place it. It's like an island. What is the city? What language do these people speak at home? Kya khana khate hain? There's no idea. It's all very generic. But then when you watch some of the parallel cinema, it has such a strong sense of time and place. For example, if you look at Katha, the way that Deepthi Naval's character is dressed in it, even the fact that she wears like a hibiscus flower in her hair, it's so her, it's so that character. No other heroine is going to wear like a hibiscus flower of all things. um
mm,
did you have any iconic looks you love?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you said Charulata, because that came to mind instantly for me. And when I came to Bengali films fairly late, but when I started watching them, especially the ones set in the 19th century, I'm smitten by those puff sleeve blouses with, and I can't explain why I'm so fascinated by those. And I think partly it's because so often those films are in black and white, so you can't rely on color to tell you anything more. But there's something about the interplay of the volume and the shapes and the textures and everything, and like the diagonal of the sari with the puff of the sleeve, like I'm just absolutely enthralled by those. And then I was quickly looking up a film while you were talking, because I was blanking on its name. I am very much a 70s film fan in my heart. And Choti Si Baat, do you remember
Oh
Vidya
yeah.
Sinha's saris in there? Because she often has these sort of graphic print, maybe I think often with a plain blouse, but a very graphic print. I'm very drawn to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how those fall in the different continuums of fashion, but again, they remind me, of course, of the graphic design in other mediums. from that time, but I just those bold prints, often geometric, but I love big florals and all too. But yeah, those stand
Right.
out to me. I mean, I don't know anything, but those are feasts for my eyes.
I'm really glad you mentioned this film because it was in my mind, but
Mm.
there's so much to talk about that I couldn't mention it. This was also a film that became very iconic for its saris because Vidya Sinha became like an icon for all the young working girls of that period because that was probably the first generation of girls who were working in private firms
That makes
and
sense.
doing sort of these jobs in big cities like Mumbai, because this film clearly has a place and time,
Yeah.
and especially the city of Mumbai plays a big role here. And so Vidya Sinha in this film, she's wearing a lot of these polyester saris that were also new for that period, the synthetics. And of course, at that time, most people used to wear mill cottons or a little bit of the hand woven cottons, the regional drapes. But this aesthetic, of graphics, like Beth has already mentioned, and of light saris that looked very evidently easy to drape and maintain and so on and so forth. So that became really popular. Of course, that has a flip side because now synthetics have taken over the country
Yeah.
completely, and even in the rural, in more so in the rural and the semi-urban areas, you see people gravitating more towards synthetics, and that has sort of adversely affected the handloom sector
Mm-hmm.
and cotton and silks. But yes, for that period, Choti Si Baat influenced the sari trends a lot because that was the time when a lot of mills in Mumbai were churning out these new polyester synthetic saris, and this film just sort of took them to another level of relatability for the young working girls of that era.
There was also a lot of, I've seen a lot of retro advertisements from that time that
Yeah,
I think Rekha Sharmila Tagore used to do for like Khatao and Bombay Dyeing and all of these things. And those
right.
are really fun to see too, because in those ads, they very, like the copywriting very much spells out how convenient they are and how they're very low maintenance. And oh, I can just put it on in 5 minutes and it doesn't. So they're like stressing that. And it's always the slicked back hair and the big bindi, and I think Rekha wore a lot of these kind of saris in Ghar, in that movie with your favorite Beth, Vinod Mehra. So, okay. Let's see. Ooh, yes, Beth, do you want to talk about the sari point? You were very excited about
Oh,
that.
yes. So a term that I've heard as mentioned in discussions of Hindi cinema in particular is the sari point. So the point in the film at which a heroine who has been wearing, Western clothes, probably shorter skirts, right? At a certain point in her love story, she switches to saris. And I was curious what you thought about that and how directors use it and kind of what it's telling us about the heroine.
Um, this is a very, this is a very it's a multi-layered kind of thing. But I don't recall any other film at this moment than Kuch Kuch Hota Hai that
Right.
had the
That's the big one.
Infamous.
Yeah.
yeah. So that is the only film I recall because most films, they do have like a makeover point where
Mm.
in most cases, the heroine is a plain Jane and she wears glasses and then somehow the glasses are off and the hair is all let loose and then she becomes all attractive. So I don't think I can recall too many films with a sari point. I do remember a lot of them with this whole makeover kind of a thing. But yeah, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai is the only film I think, and of course it was iconic and it was a generation defining film, so it did have a sari point. um, yeah, I mean, there are negatives and positives to it, but I would like to look at it from a positive perspective. See, at least for not for my mom's generation, but for yeah, maybe even for hers. For at least three generations now, saris have defined coming of age for
Mm.
Indian girls. So the first time a girl wears a sari is a big moment for the whole family because, like I mentioned, my school farewell earlier, and when I wore a I used to wear a kiddie sari also sometimes because my mom had ordered that from Kolkata. And as a kid, as a 7, 8 year old, I did wear saris. But when you have matured and you sort of grown up, and then you wear a sari for the first time for your school farewell or for something, everybody is just they feel like you've grown up.
Right.
And it's a point of realization for your, especially for the men in the family, for the father, for the brothers, and they sit up and take notice. Oh my god, when did she grow up so much? So
Right.
so that's been a thing. And also I think there is a fair bit of fetishization that's gone into the saris. So because if you are trying to be sensuous in a sari, it's probably not as problematic as it would probably get if you're trying to wear something which is not traditional. So this is like a middle path where you can
Mm.
be attractive, you can be sexy, but you are still wearing something which is cultural. So it is sort of like a balance. And that's
Mm.
why filmmakers do that. Because I don't remember where I read this, but some of these directors, they also said that the heroine mostly doesn't have a problem wearing a sari. So you can make her wear a sari and do sort of scenes that are not exactly sanskari. So
Yeah.
that's why all these songs that bordered on being erotic, like Tip Tip Barsa Pani, or
The rain
that,
songs.
yeah, the rain songs, Kate Nahi Katte, and all of those, they have been shot in saris. Because
Yeah.
you have to find like a, but for this particular film, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, I felt that it was a very interesting choice. Because at that time a lot of people had moved away from saris. At
Mm.
least the generation that was, I was maybe 13, 14 at that time. But generation that was in its 20s, they had sort of moved away from saris. And here
Mm.
they have shown a girl who has consciously and out of choice, she has adopted saris as regular wear in her life, not as
Right.
occasional. And for sari wearing culture, it is a, I think it was a great choice. Of course, now on social media platforms you'll find everybody bashing Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, saying this, that
Right.
he didn't love her until she became all pretty, and all of that. And of course that's valid, I'm not invalidating any of it. But the fact that they chose the sari to show that she's become a different person, and she's found herself. Because in
Mm.
college they have shown like she's a bit confused about what she wants, and just to get the guy that she wants, she also wears a skirt. And she doesn't look good in that, she doesn't feel good in it, she feels
Mm.
uncomfortable. That's why everyone makes fun of her. But when she starts wearing saris as like a more mature person, she looks very confident.
Right.
So yeah, so for me, I read it very differently. And I think this
Mm.
this depends a lot on who's looking at it how. Because I relate to it. I for a very long period, for like like a decade in my life, I tried to fit in by wearing all sorts of fast fashion clothes, of all skirts to dresses to to all sorts of these silhouettes. But I never felt happy and confident in them. And when I discovered the sari and I started wearing it, it just gave me so much freedom.
Mm.
Because I realized that, oh, this is who I always was. So
Yeah.
I look at it like that. So at
It's
least
all.
yeah, for Kuch
No,
Kuch
go ahead.
Hota Hai, I think the sari point is, for me, I think I look at it positively. But not so much with all those makeovers where the heroine is expected to drop the glasses and open the hair and all of that. But yeah.
I think it's interesting because I've kind of had a sari point in my life as well, and actually have folks like you to thank for it. Because I feel like our generation, at least my generation, was so confused. We went through all these phases, and there was just so much noise. There's just so many people. There's peer pressure. There's your parents. There's all this. There's this divide also when you're growing up, like when you're a teen and you're rebellious, and you're like, "Nahi, mujhe bhenji nahi dikhna hai," and it's like you associate saris at a certain age, like when you're 14, 15, with "Arey, to mummy pehenti hai sari," and you're like, "No, I'm gonna wear jeans and tank tops and things like that." And then you come full circle. So I remember when I turned 18, my mom was like, you know where we're going tomorrow? And I was like, where? And she goes, we're going to Kalani Ketan on Marine Drive. And I'm like, why are we going to Kalani Ketan? That's where you go with your sisters. So she's like, we're buying you a sari. I'm like, I don't want a sari. Mujhe nahi pehna hai. She's like, no, you turned 18 in our family. When someone turns 18, we buy them a sari. I'm like, okay, this seems like it's more for you than me. And it was. But I remember we went and I was very like, "Ye kya ho raha hai? I don't want to be a behenji and all." And then I saw this wine colored, like this burgundy kind of Mysore, no, Girija silk. And it had like, what is that animal? Valli or some Yalli or Valli, it's called. It's like a
Yeah,
griffin.
yeah,
Beth, you would like
yeah.
it. It's like a
Ooh.
griffin. It's a mythological animal. It had that all over the pallus. And for the first time in my life, my eyes sparkled. And I was like, because I used to read a lot of fantasy and all also. So I was like, what is this animal? My mother's like, oh, it's a mythological animal. And I was like, I like this color. I think I'll look good at this. And I bought it and I still have that sari. And I wore it for some function and there was a lot of wah wah and everything. Um, but then again, the sari, and then, I moved to the US and then the sari became a thing. Okay, you wear it for Diwali and you wear it for Ganesh Chaturthi, you wear it for weddings and ye wo, but otherwise, almari mein padi rehti hai. Then I had another awakening in my 30s where on Instagram, I started seeing the hashtag sari not sorry. And then I started seeing these people who are, wearing saris on a regular basis. And I was like, they look awesome. They
Mhm.
wear all these amazing weaves, which again, my mom used to wear all of these handloom weaves, and she used to go to like Bhimtari Jatra and like all these, like the in Mumbai, we have at Azad Maidan and everything, there is this national handloom exhibition. She used to go for that.
Mhm.
So I was like, all of these people look so amazing in these saris. I also want to wear. And for me, the 100 sari pact was too much. I was like, ye to nahi hoga mujhse, because I can't wear them to work or anything in the US. So then I started taking baby steps where I was like, okay, I'll wear one sari per month, thereby ending the year with minimum 12. And if I can do more, good. Otherwise, no. So that was like a sari point for me. And there was this whole like journey where I was living in New York and I'd be like, okay, it is my one time this month I'm going to wear this Masaba Gupta sari, but everyone's going to look at me and stare. But this is the advantage of living in New York. No one actually stares. You can, you can go down Fifth Avenue in a unicycle. Nobody cares. You could wear like a straight jacket. Nobody, किसी को फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But it was so liberating because those first moments when you step out of your building and you're like, oh God, I'm wearing a sari, no one cares, no one has the least bit of interest in you, and you actually feel good, you feel special, you feel
Mhm.
pretty. My husband was like full of compliments for me. He's like, wow, you abandoned your sweatshirts for this. So that ended up being a sari point for me as well, and now I wear them regularly. And of course I have people like you to thank for providing me with the inspiration. So I
Mhm.
think that's interesting too, because there's just so much baggage, unnecessary baggage attached to saris and what it means. And it's kind of like, why do you have to attach all this baggage? It's just fabric. I mean, it's just 6 yards of fabric, and you're the one who's complicating it by being like, "No, ye to behenji hoti, ye to mummy, ye to." It's like, whatever, get over it, wear it, be happy, and life is short.
Mhm.
That was my philosophical message of the day, Beth. Okay, my next question,
Yeah.
Isha, is okay, what do you think about the way that saris are styled in Bollywood films? Because of course we have saris worn by the roti hui ma, we have Nirupa Roy in her saris, we have, in a movie like say Silsila, you have the sexy mistress, you have Rekha in all her glamorous saris, but then you have Jaya Bachchan in all of her very subdued kind of cottons and silks, and she's very like elegant. We have saris, like I recently binged on Bihar the Khaki chapter, and one of the characters in it, she wears these very bold bright polyester prints in like parrot green and whatnot. So how do you feel about the way that different saris are styled in different films to let us know something about the character?
So it's difficult to say if art was imitating, the society, or society imitating art. I can't say, because they reflect each other. But I
Hmm.
have seen this distinction even in real life, because my grandmothers,
Hmm.
I mean, my own grandmother passed away very young, but my father's aunts. So I saw them, my grand aunts, and they used to, their husbands were still alive. They were not all widows, but they had moved on to very somber colors and
Mm.
fabrics that are coarse and you know, sort of heavier in a way, and they gravitated more towards cottons and silks. And the generation after that, my mom and her peer group, you know, they used to sort of gravitate more towards the chiffons and printed chiffons, because you know they thought that, oh, we are young, so we are supposed to wear colors that are brighter and, you know, with floral prints and so on and so forth. So they did that. And then there were some uh, women, maybe not from my own family, but my mom's friends, or you know, some other acquaintances, who were the ones who would wear blouses that were, you know, sort of different from what,
Mm.
they were not so conservative, they were a bit more revealing, and they, even their saris were a bit more see through, so on.
Mm.
Then there were, depending on which profession they were in, there were women who were they were particular about wearing handlooms or silks, and they wanted a sort of a seriousness to their personality, because they were probably in government jobs or they were teachers and so on. So this did exist, like, you know, even if we don't look at films, I've seen this in real life. And then of course in films you do see this whole thing being reinforced, because Nirupa Roy, even if she wasn't playing a widowed mother, even as a mother who is probably, you know, her husband is still around, she wore whites, and you know, whites with borders and so on.
Mm.
And I can somehow recall this film. I don't know if anybody else even remembers this film apart from me. It's called Sangeet. I think that's what its name was. And Madhuri has a
Oh
double role,
yeah.
and yeah, she's playing an older woman and a young one, and they are sitting together in one of the scenes. And the older one
Mm.
is wearing a silk sari, and the sari pallu is draped around her. And as a younger girl, she's wearing a more flowy, sheer
Mm.
kind of a fabric, and
Ah,
the pallu is freer than, you know, it's not wrapped around her exactly. So,
Right.
like I said, you know, it's both reflecting each other. But this has I've heard my mom say this all the time. Oh, you're so young, why do you want to wear browns and blacks, and you
Mm.
know, why do you want to wear whites? And so there is this whole perception about colors, about fabrics. And so when, you know, I decided to wear saris, I gravitated more towards cottons, because I was living in Bombay, and Bombay is so humid, I did not want to wear anything else. And then everybody told me, oh, but this is cotton, and this will fluff up, and it'll make you look fatter, and it'll make you look shorter, and make you
hmm.
look older. And so there are these perceptions, and films must have played a part, because you hardly ever see the heroine wearing a cotton sari, unless it's a
Right.
Sham Benegal film, or it's like a parallel cinema film. You don't see the heroine wearing a cotton sari. They are always in sheer fabrics, and always in
Right.
pastels or florals. And so there is this whole thing that films have reinforced. So of course.
Right. And you're right. Like one of the things I started doing when I actually started buying or wearing saris because I wanted to is I started gravitating towards a lot of the Masaba Gupta saris. I have her saris, I have stuff by Chapa. Basically, the quirkier prints, the more fun kind of prints, because that's just what was appealing to me. And I like the color play and the block prints and all of that thing. And I remember my mom asking me, I showed her this Masaba sari I have, which I'd actually seen on Vidya Balan's Instagram. And I was like, I love this sari. And that's why I bought it. And I showed it to her and she goes, it's a Masaba Gupta sari. It's designer, so it must be expensive. And I was like, yeah, it was. And she's like, why would you spend your money on buying this sari with this quirky print? I mean, it's not going to last the length of time. You're not going to, like, 10, 15 years later, it's not going to look as good to you. And it's no one else can also wear this sari. It's like, it's going to look odd and weird. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I probably even at 80, I'll find this attractive, so it's fine. But it's true that there is, I think it's actually really good that in India we have, designers who are experimenting with saris, doing different things. There's something for everyone's taste. And I think it's one of the reasons why the sari is a traditional garment that's actually still worn. I mean, literally from the Indus Valley civilization. If you look at a lot of other cultures, no one in Germany is wearing lederhosen unless it's like a special day in Bavaria or whatever. No one in Japan is wearing kimonos anymore. They've just become these very like ceremonial outfits. Most of my Korean friends don't even own hanboks. They just rent one. I was like, wow, you rent a hanbok for your wedding? And they were like, yeah, because it's so much money. Who's going to spend money on hanbok? And I was like, we pour money into our like lehengas and kanjivarams and banarsis. But I do like, I mean, although my mother thinks it's like a passing fad and it's silly to have these like masaba prints and stuff, I think that's how you're going to get the younger generation interested in them. If you start showing them only ilkals and things like that and you're like, ye pehno, they'll be like, no thank you. But if you give them these options, that's how you keep that textile alive, because then people can make it their own and they can wear it in a fun way with sunglasses and sneakers, and they can style it their own way, right? Okay. Let's go with the next question.
Okay. So this builds on that, I think. Actresses who you think wear saris very well, this could be contemporary people or from past generations.
I think, I would just flip this and say that I don't recall any actress who does not wear the sari. For some reason,
lovely.
I can't think of anybody who's worn a sari badly. Because for some reason, whenever they're wearing it, it just transforms them, and they look like they were always supposed to wear it. But
that's lovely.
I do have so I do have a personal favorite, and that's Wahida Rehman. Because she's had such a long career, and she's acted over the decades. I've seen her aging, and she's continued to wear the sari in all her roles, and she's just looked stunning. And the way she's also embraced her age, like I never saw her coloring her hair or going for any sort of treatments, etc. I mean, it's, at least I can say that I don't see it evident on her face, but how she's embraced her age, and still she's looked just as graceful, even with that age, just as graceful as she looked in Pyasa. So I've seen her in, I think she was in Lamhe, and then, even in Rang De Basanti, and she's just been there, and she's throughout those stages of her life, she's looked gorgeous in saris. So she's my favorite, of course. And I think even Shabana Azmi ji, I just love her in saris and the way she carries them. I wish, Smita Patil ji had a longer life, and she had stayed on, and then we could have seen her aging beautifully with her saris, because she had a bunch of her saris, like you said, even in her personal collection, she had some handloom saris, even, Sambalpuris from Odisha, etc.
Wow.
So it would have been nice to see what she wore in her personal life later, as she aged.
There's a particular person I'd like to ask you about, and I'm sorry I didn't think of this ahead of time. So I am, for our listeners, I'm springing this on Isha. A person that I think about when I think about saris actually is Nanda. Because when I started watching 60s films and Nanda, I always thought she looked a little strange when they had her in Western clothes. But when they put her in saris or salwar kameez, instantly, I feel like she looks, I wish I could be more specific and better. And maybe it's just a question of comfort. I don't know her life. I can't speak to that. But she is a person who I feel like just comes alive on the screen in saris in a way, excuse me, that she didn't in Western clothes. I wonder if you have any opinions about her, either of you.
Go ahead, Isha.
Yeah, I think I've seen her. I've not seen too many films with Nanda, but I think the one I remember is Jab Jab Phool Khile, and it's one of those very iconic ones. And you're absolutely right. I think some of the silhouettes they chose for her when she was wearing, those pantsuits and stuff, they were not as attractive on her, I feel.
Yeah.
And this probably has got to do with how the sari is very, it just takes the shape of your body and it enhances the best of you, and sort of compensates for maybe parts that you're not so proud of. Although I'm not somebody who thinks too much. Like I get a lot of texts and DMs asking me, oh, I'm a short person and what sari to wear, and I am, I have this, my height is this or my weight is this. I don't believe in sort of, thinking too much about all those things. But yes, the sari has this quality of embracing all sorts of body types and
Mm,
shapes, and it just brings out the best of you. And like you said, culturally, there is a comfort that probably we have, a generational kind of a comfort that we've inherited as Indian women, and regular, our ancestors or our foremothers have been sari wearers. So probably there is something genetic, and I have
mhm.
no way of proving it, but probably there is something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think they used to choose these kind of silhouettes on Nanda that were not necessarily the most flattering. And for some reason, she and Babita used to get a lot of like really shiny satins. And I mean, Babita pulled them off with a lot of elan, but there are some zingers in those costumes where you're like, I don't know who would look good in this like Pepto Bismol pink satin monstrosity. And I think with Nanda, the discomfort would show in her face where she was probably like, "Ye kya pehna diya mujhe?" But whereas with Babita, I think maybe she was like, "It's okay, I can deal with this. I'll handle it." But you're right, and I felt that way also a little bit about Vajanti Mala, Beth, because
Mm,
I've seen Vajanti Mala in Western clothes. I've seen her in pantsuits and everything, and she looked fine. I mean, I don't think they gave her the brunt of the worst outfits like they did Nanda or Babita. But even with her, you see Vajanti Mala in like a Kanjivaram and she just comes alive.
mm.
It's the same thing even for someone like Rekha. I mean, Rekha used to look phenomenal no matter what you put her in. You could put her in a swimsuit, she killed it. You could put her in all manner of like cabaret outfits, Western
Yeah.
outfits. She always looked great. But Rekha to us is synonymous with a sari. She even now
Yeah.
it's like everyone like associates her sort of with this very heavy gold kanjivaram and the jhumkas and the gajras. Like she has like a certain look that she's made her own. So maybe for some people I think it's like they feel so much better in a sari that it translates visually as better,
That makes
maybe.
sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think my personal favorite is Vidya Balan.
Wow.
Also
Because I
beautiful.
just love her in general. I mean, she's such a brilliant actress, so beautiful, so smart. Like, what's not to love? But I think of the younger generation, I think she's the one that has really embraced saris. And I think maybe starting with like Parinita, and then, with some of the other films that she did, like, she just looks amazing in saris. And she tends to wear them a lot off screen as well. Um, uh, she wears handlooms, she wears cottons, linens, synthetics, she wears all sorts of things. When she was promoting Sherni, she wore a lot of really quirky saris that had like tigers and everything
Oh,
printed
neat.
on it, which I loved. I wanted every single
Yeah.
one that she got. And she's spoken about her love for saris and how she feels her most comfortable. And it's just something that she's embraced at this point. And Vidya Balan is also a victim of bad styling that they've done for some of her films, most notably Kismat Connection. So I don't know what happened in that movie, but her hairstyle, the clothes, she looks visibly miserable in some of the scenes, in some of the songs in Kismat Connection. And I think eventually she came to this point where she was like, I'm going to stop fighting this and I'm going to wear what makes me happy. And from then on, you kind of see this like almost a Vidya moment where she like comes into her own and now she's just like always killing it. Okay. And then what was our last question, Beth?
Oh, our
Oh,
last. Yeah, you ask it.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
So, any pet peeves that you have, Isha, regarding Bollywood? If you could speak to a producer or a director right now, and you could be like, "You stop doing this thing; it's annoying me." Imagine that you have a direct line to Bollywood right now, and you're like, you have a pet peeve that you wish that they would stop doing.
Maybe, if we were doing this talk, if we were having this discussion a few months ago, I could have said many things. But I think um, I've just becoming a bit more understanding of late,
Mm,
because of just how much bashing Bollywood is facing at the moment.
true.
I mean, for everything that they do, they are being given, left, right, and center. And
Flack.
so I was just, I'm happy to not give any feedback at the moment. But like I said, I really liked Sheetal Sharma's work in Gangubai, but I just wish he had not used that uh, copy of chicken curry in that film, because like when I wrote about it, I even wrote about it in my Insta stories, and I got a very nasty message from some costume designer who said that it's very
Mm.
easy for you to say this, but we work on such tight budgets, and sometimes there is no budget for besides, Gangubai has been shown as a sex worker, and they don't have
Oh.
so much money to buy originals and so on and so forth. But I said, listen, firstly, this is a period film which is set in the 60s. So at that time, chicken curry copies were not being made. So this is not
Mm,
period accurate in any way. Secondly, Gangubai has been shown as a character who's very particular about what she wears, and she spends a lot of money on her clothing and jewelry. They've been very clear about this in the film.
Mm.
So she's not really, like, she's not just a sex worker, she's a businesswoman, she's a mafia queen. She's also a madam, so she has money to buy like an
yeah.
authentic chicken if she wants. And if you're talking about you're saying that it's about the budget for you, then it's always possible these days for stylists to collaborate with a lot of sellers and designers and so on, and maybe get something on rent if you can't afford it for the film, if you can't buy it for the film. So there are so many options now. There are sellers who now sell pre-loved saris and
Mm.
second hand and vintage. You could get something from them, and there are always these little labels who want to be featured in films, and they can easily give you some of their authentic hand embroidered pieces. So
Right.
if you are showing an embroidery particularly, then might as well show the authentic thing, because then that's how this whole sector of handmade is going to benefit.
Mm.
Otherwise,
Wow.
you're going to actually you're going to further uh, harm the kind. I mean, they're already sort of facing so much competition from machines, and then you are going to further harm their cause by doing this and normalizing this. So that's the only thing. Otherwise, I feel like it's like, again, it's a creative choice. Like, there was a time when I was very fixated on this whole thing of accuracy, and has to be period appropriate and has to be historically researched thoroughly and blah. But now I feel that sometimes it's absolutely okay for for a film to be an island, because
Mm.
sometimes that is how it remains relatable, because you are not fixating it to one particular period or a place, and that's how more it becomes a bit more accessible also. Like
Mm.
earlier I heard somebody say this, I don't remember who, that they a producer from the 90s, and they said that you know now there is so much emphasis on getting the accents right, on getting the regional dialect right, and which is a great thing. But sometimes it's okay for your all your characters to speak that one khadi boli simple Hindi that all over the country, pan country, in fact all over South Asia, people understand it. So you're
Yeah.
just going to make it very accessible by
Oh,
using
yeah.
that. Yeah, so there is always this debate between authenticity and accessibility and a
Mm.
wider
Mm,
reach and reach, and keeping it more niche. And so it's a creative choice. There are no rights and wrongs in this, I think. Like the film that I can right now recall that got so much flack was Meenakshi Sundareshwar, because
Acha.
they showed a story from Chennai and from Madurai, sorry, from Tamil Nadu, and the characters were speaking Hindi, and people were really disturbed by this. But and of course, now we have the subtitles. You can make a film in Tamil, and yet people in Hindi will watch it. But the whole thing is that sometimes it's a creative choice to use a language to tell a story, because after all, Devdas is also a Bengali story,
Yeah.
but you are telling it in Hindi and Urdu, right? So
Right.
it's okay sometimes. So I think I'm a bit more accepting of such creative choices now.
Gotcha. What about the flip side of that? Like, is there things that you like that Bollywood is doing that you think it should continue doing, sari wise, or sari fashion wise, or any other parting thoughts that you have regarding the subject?
No, if you ask me, of course, there are many people who say that, Bollywood has, and this name Bollywood, I don't know
Right.
how good it is to even use it, but that it's done more harm than good, and how it has
Mm.
shaped up perceptions to certain things. But if you ask me, I would say, at least in terms of saris, it has always done something or the other that has kept the sari in focus, at least.
Hmm. Right.
At least the saris have always been there on screen. I don't
Right.
remember a decade where, saris have completely disappeared. It's not really happened.
Mm.
And I think we should give the film industry its due credit for it. And personally, I would want to widen my own horizon by watching more of Bengali cinema, or maybe, cinema from other regions. Like, I've already started watching a bit of Malayalam, and also Marathi films. So
Mhm.
I enjoy that, and I feel that all this regional cinema also has contributed a lot to keeping sari alive
Right.
on screen, because otherwise sari is not going anywhere. You see, 90% of the real rural and semi-urban India still wears saris,
Mm.
Right.
and they wear it happily. Of course, sometimes it's not really a choice. It's a conditioning, and it's the backgrounds they're coming from, and so on. But the sari is not really going anywhere. But at least for the urban
Hmm.
audience, and for the urban dwellers who are in the big cities, and who are more privileged, so to say, the films have always brought the sari to limelight. Right from like a Mehuna to even now there are films like, even in Minakshi Sundareshwar, I think Sanya Malhotra wore saris. And then there was Tapsi Pannu in what was that film? I'm forgetting its name. This whole pulp fiction, Haseen Dilruba.
Oh
She wore
yeah.
some really,
Oh,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
glam and interesting saris she's worn in that. So, and I think even Sita Ramam, there was a film with Dulquer
Oh
Salman
yeah.
and Mrinal Chakri. So Mrinal is, I think that is also a Sheetal Sharma film. So I think films even today, right from the beginning in the 20s and 30s, they have celebrated the sari in their own way.
Mhm.
And I'm more than grateful for that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, Beth, did you have any other questions for Isha?
I mean, a million, but I really appreciate the time that you have given to us for this. And I love that you're talking about regional, um, the differences that bring specificity and authenticity to projects. And it is, Pitu was saying in another episode that one of her goals for 2023 is to watch more regional cinema.
Yeah.
And you're making me think about all the different benefits there are to doing something different than what you've been doing. So I'm glad that you talked about this, and it does make me want to think more about what people are wearing in the things that I'm watching, and I'm so grateful to think about that.
I know that Isha recently did like a little series on her Instagram that I loved. It was where she was posting photos of like normal everyday people wearing
Mm,
saris while they're working, and it was amazing. Like, and she would write like the location, like where she shot it. It's like a person who is sitting outside on a bench, and a person who's, and it was really eye opening and fabulous, because I feel like sometimes also those of us who are urban, or those of us who are a little bit more privileged, we're pretty much just living in this bubble, and we're talking about film stars and designers and boutiques and designer labels and everything, and we completely forget the people around us, the janitors and the ticket collectors and the police women and the librarians and all the people, the bank clerks, who are wearing a sari day in day out, not expecting any pat on the back. They're not doing any sort of hashtag sari not sorry ya jo bhi hai. And it's so easy to just like, you just don't see, you just like glaze over it. And I love that Isha was also highlighting that. So to all of our viewers, you have to follow Desi Drapes, and we'll put the name. It's fabulous.
mm,
I love all of the posts that Isha does. You learn so much. You learn about early sari influencers, different kinds of saris, like styling ideas, and her own like sari photos that she posts of herself
mm.
are just fabulous. So thank you so much, Isha, for joining. It was such a great time. We had such fun with you. I feel like we've known you forever. It could be because I stalk your Instagram, but still, it didn't feel like weird. We had so much fun having you on, and thank you so much for coming. And we'll definitely link to you. And thanks for talking about sarees today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for that really generous introduction and also these closing thoughts. And I'm very happy that you enjoy my work. And I really had fun talking to both of you because I think we have this thing for films in common. All of us love films.
Yes.
And I think that's why it was fun. And I hope that we can do this again sometime and talk more
for
about.
sure.
I think we could talk about costuming many more times, and I can't wait to, because I've actually, yesterday I was driving home from work thinking about some more ideas about costuming related topics, which I will be sending because I think we should do more.
Right, we should. We'll nag Isha. Isha will be like, what are these 5 messages from this irritating person at Filmi Ladies?
No,
I'm
a filmy lady myself.
Yes.
We love it. We could tell.
Yeah.
So when I told Beth, I was like, for our sari idea, I think we should have a guest. And there's this person called Isha. I follow her from my personal account. And I think I'm going to spam her with all these messages and force her to come because I think she'll be fun. And Beth was like, do it. Well, thank you. And thanks to all our viewers and listeners. Thank you from the Filmi Ladies. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, where we give little snapshots and ideas of what our next episode is going to be if you're a keener and you really, really, really need to know. Thanks for watching and listening. And thank you so much. Bye.